places to show them. We have two of the filmmakers here, hopefully, I think. Do we still have them? Yes, perfect. All right. Hi, Itanwe. Can I call you Ita?
Yes, that's perfect.
All right. And Connie, hi, welcome. Um, I just wanted to ask you a few questions, and the audience can ask questions as well. There's still time. Questions at impact.nl. Ita, first, the seashell is obviously central in this film, but I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the significance of it in Mesoamerican communities.
In ancient Mesoamerican culture, for example, the Maya culture, but it is a conglomeration of cultures, it was a symbol for the zero. So when you count just the number zero, but it also was used as a symbol for the calendar, for the Mesoamerican calendar, and by extension for time. So, and when I found that out, which was by mere coincidence, I thought it was really nice to work with a seashell and the concept of time. I wanted to make a film about time very much, reflecting on past, present, and future. And then the seashells seemed like a very nice symbol that isn't in use anymore, but precisely because I was trying to reconnect to roots and to ancient times, it
Are you still there? I think maybe we lost you for a little bit.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm still here.
I was wondering, you have, I've seen a few of your other films. They always, or at least the ones that I saw, are in Mexican communities. What is your connection to these stories in this community?
My mother is from an indigenous community in Mexico, and we lived in Mexico until I was 6 years old. My father is Dutch, and then we moved to Holland, not living in Holland anymore, living in Scotland. So a lot of moving around, but yes, most of my films are set in my mother's community, and or the region, at least, where my mother is from.
You tell these stories from your mother's country predominantly, but I was wondering, I've seen a few of your interviews, and you talk about the stories that need to be told and that aren't told enough, but I was wondering what kind of stories are we still missing or are not told often enough?
Well, in my case, as my mother is from an indigenous community in Mexico, Mexico is a very racist country that just with the release of Roma last year sort of understood that it has an indigenous population. So filmmaking in Mexico is very much reserved to the elite. And Mexico is a racialized country, so that elite is generally white. And I think because of that, a lot of my filmmaking effort has gone into trying to make films that have a different perspective that is quite unusual for Mexico, and in a way is unusual for Europe, because of course I'm a migrant here, and when people discuss Mexico with me, quite often they think it's one country with one culture, instead of understanding that there are 60 different languages. And I do understand that if that's the case for Mexico, it's probably the case for a lot of different countries that we don't know, and might have minorities who are underrepresented or hardly ever present in the media. So yes, I've become interested in general in representation of, let's say, marginalized groups or marginalized communities.
Yeah. Connie, I have a question for you. The seed is something that I think returns in your work. Can you tell me a little bit about its significance?
Yeah, so I do, so most of my current projects all deal with seeds, and I'm really interested in the seed as this both like object and subject. It's like, yeah, it's both like an object and a being that is quite liminal. I I'm really interested in the ways that seeds occupy multiple temporal registers. Like if they can, you know, like a seed, when you hold a seed, it's not clear if it's alive or dead, and it can kind of and it sort of germinates on its own schedule. And so in the film, as well as like another film that I'm working on right now that is part of the same cycle, I'm really interested in seeds as a metaphor for, or I guess like symbol for like the power of rumors and collectively produced informal knowledge and mythology and legends. And so, yeah, I mean, like the film, like The Lonely Age it's about seeds, but also it's about, you know, these like how people are responding to these rumors of these magical seeds. And the real like narrative tension for me in the film is around just like the power of these rumors and how people respond to them. And so, yeah, I'm really interested in seeds as a thing that can, you know, that carry hopes and dreams within them. I'm really interested in seeds as like a metaphor for both survival and dreams of survival, as well as people's fears of contamination and invasion. And so those are themes that I've been working with in a number of projects that deal with seeds.
Hmm. Yeah, I saw that you work with theories of contamination, as you said. How has the current pandemic influenced your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's been influencing it a lot. I'm still sort of grappling with that. Especially the ways that contamination narratives are often racialized, and so yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit hard for me to answer that question right now because I'm still working through the like the different poles of that understanding. You know, like, I mean, we're still in it, and we're still understanding what it means to be in a pandemic. We're still understanding what it means to like survive in a pandemic and get through it and to hope within it. And yeah, and so, I mean, I guess this doesn't quite directly answer your question with regard to contamination narratives and the pandemic, but I am like with the sort of like follow-up film that I'm working on, the main themes are sort of how like, yeah, how people in a state of crisis and ecological devastation navigate between the poles of hope and denial and slash despair. And I think I mean, I feel like with regard to narratives of contamination and the pandemic, I mean, I mean, the causes of the pandemic are so complex, and the ways in which that the pandemic has spread are very much tied to global capitalism, and in the ways in which modern industrial societies have been encroaching upon formerly wild spaces. And so there are these like really crazy like permeations that are happening between like the urban and the rural, or the urban and the wild, and like that, you know, the jump of the disease from animals to humans is something that I think a lot of right now, and it's really easy, I think, to sort of blame it on a particular group of people or country, especially if there's a lot of economic, you know, conflict surrounding that relationship, or like economic and like political conflict surrounding the relationship between, say, the U.S. and China. That's you know, that's something that plays out in a lot of nationalistic rhetoric around like who's to blame. You know, like we see that in climate change rhetoric too, with the U.S. kind of blaming a bunch of other countries when the U.S. is responsible for most of the exporting of the pollution around the world.
And you say that we switch between positive stories of hope and negative thoughts. What do you think would prohibit us like from action? So how can a dystopian narrative inhibit us, and how can it maybe propel us into action?
Totally, yeah. I really appreciate that question because I mean I think I think it really speaks to the power of media and storytelling, and it's something that I think about a lot with regard to like my own sense of responsibility around filmmaking and making art. I mean I think one of the powerful things or mobilizing things about a dystopian narrative, especially like a beautifully rendered one, is that it can like there's, you know, it's something that you want to look at if it's beautiful. You know, like a beautifully made film is something that people want to look at. And so I think as a society we're very acclimated to like pop apocalyptic imagery, and so it's like a trope, it's like a visual it's a kind of like visual rhetoric that we know very well and that we're sort of familiar with. And I do think there's a sort of like romantic quality to it. Like I think a lot of, you know, it's like, oh, like, you know, a lot of these apocalypse movies have this sense of like survival, and that can potentially be mobilizing. But at the same time, I think one of the big dangers of a normalized dystopian narrative, especially one that is really centered around like survival of the self, is that like it can it can like normalize these sort of like neoliberal or like right-wing ideologies of like, you know, a single person. You know, if you think about a lot of popular apocalypse movies, it's not really about community surviving. It's about like one dude or like one heteronormative couple surviving, and they're usually white. And so that I think is, you know, that's a narrative that can be very distorting. I do, like, I've over the past year and a half, I've spent a lot of time looking at like apocalypse related media. I guess it's kind of this like perverse interest I have, and like there are some really scary websites out there that are like you know, run by like basically like right-wing militia people of the United States who imagine themselves as surviving an apocalypse, and they have all this information about, you know, how to build your own bunker, how to like, you know, make your own hand crank radio, all this, you know, sort of like almost sci-fi stuff, but it's like within the context of a potential like actual apocalypse. And that's those websites are very scary. and I feel like there's almost like a fantastical element in a lot of them, which is like, oh, I'm the lone survivor, you know, with my like 12 guns. And I think that for me is an example of the ways in which like a dystopian narrative can be corrosive and toxic and dangerous. But I do think there can potentially also be something mobilizing about it if it's used within, you know, if it's underpinned by this like more community-based radically, like, yeah, this community-based you know, sense of hope and dreaming that is, yeah.
No, I agree, and I think that's also something that Reclamation by the last film that we showed had a little bit
amazing.
Yeah, I don't know. So that's why I wanted to conclude the film program with that one as well. A different story, a different end of the world, perhaps, or new possibilities. But I think we have to conclude now. I'm afraid that's the end. We are on a very strict schedule, but I would like to just take this chance to thank you one more time for being here for the Q&A and letting us show your film. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.